order, and we'll get things underway. Welcome to meeting number 32 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans, pursuant to Standing Order 108-2 and the motion adopted on April 21st, 2021. The committee is meeting on its study of frozen at sea spot prawns. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to House Order of January 25th, 2021. Therefore, members can attend in person in the room and remotely using Zoom application. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website and the webcast, and will show only the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. To ensure an orderly meeting, I would like to outline a few rules to follow. Members and witnesses may speak in the official language of their choice. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either for English or French. You'll also notice the platform's raise hand feature on the main toolbar should you wish to speak or alert the chair. Before speaking, please click on the microphone to unmute yourself. And when you are not speaking, your mic should be on mute. I would now like to welcome our witnesses for the first panel today that we have. Department of Fisheries and Oceans. We have Rebecca Reed, Regional Director, General Pacific Region. Neil Davis, Acting Regional Director of Fisheries Management, and Nicole Gallant, Acting Regional Director, Conservation and Protection. We will now proceed with opening remarks. And Ms. Reed, we're going to turn to you for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you very much. Bonjour and good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. So as you've already heard, my name is Rebecca Reed. I'm the Regional Director General Pacific Region, Fisheries and Oceans, Canada. Mes collègues et moi-même vous.
My colleagues and I appreciate the opportunity to appear before this committee on behalf of the department. We'd like to thank you for turning your attention to this important issue.
Is to provide you with as much information as possible to support your deliberations. I am accompanied today by Neil Davis, Acting Regional Director, Fisheries Management, Pacific Region, and Nicole Gallant, Acting Regional Director, Conservation and Protection, Pacific Region. As you know, a key part of DFO's mandate is to sustainably manage Canada's fisheries. Consistent with that mandate, DFO applies a precautionary approach to fisheries management that prioritizes the conservation of stocks. The use of size limits within the commercial prawn fishery is an important part of this approach, as it helps to ensure the prawns are being harvested sustainably and that they reach sexual maturity and reproduce before being harvested, which supports the regeneration of stocks over the long term. Harvesting prawns at a larger size also increases the price per pound, improving the fishery's economic return. For this reason, the use of size limits has been supported by industry since they were first introduced to the commercial prawn fishery in the 1980s. DFO has a long-standing constructive working relationship with industry representatives in the prawn fishery, and the implementation of size limits is just one example of work the department has done in collaboration with the industry to strengthen management of the fishery. Recently, DFO has been working with industry representatives to develop packaging and labeling standards that would limit access to markets for illegal products and develop packaging standards that would meet all existing federal and provincial regulations. In the course of those discussions earlier this year, the industry practice of freezing prawns in tubs of seawater, a practice referred to as tubbing, was raised. Our officials noted that freezing prawns in this manner makes it difficult for fishery officers to readily determine whether a harvester's catch is compliant with the size limit, which is a regulatory requirement in Section 36 of the Fishery General Regulations. Industry expressed concerns about the prospect that tubbing may not meet regulatory requirements. In particular, they noted the increased importance of tubbing to many harvesters that carry freezers on board, particularly since COVID-19 pandemic resulted in weakened international markets. Tubbed prawns provides an alternative since they are a popular product in the domestic market. In response to these concerns, DFO met with industry between February and April to explore solutions. Through these discussions, the Pacific Prawn Fishermen's Association, which represents commercial prawn license holders, proposed a protocol to help harvesters ensure that their catch, including catch that is frozen in tubs, is readily available for inspection by our fishery officers. DFO confirmed its support for the protocol as an interim measure for this year while we work with industry on longer-term solutions. While we have achieved a positive outcome for this year, I would like to clarify several points for the committee. DFO did not ban the tubbing of prawns at sea. The key requirement is that any commercial harvester must package their catch in a way that allows for the size to be readily determined. This regulation has been in place since 1993, applies to all fisheries, and is essential for DFO to verify harvesters' catches and properly manage fisheries. As fishing and packaging practices evolve over time, such as the growing use of tubbing, it can bring regulatory issues into the light, requiring engagement with relevant stakeholders to determine the necessary management adjustments. This is a very typical practice and is the process we have followed here. We are committed to working with industry on a long-term solution to this issue. Over the coming year, DFO will engage with the prawn industry on the development of longer-term solutions, such as clearer packaging requirements or other measures that will help ensure the continued sustainable harvest of prawns. Merci de votre attention.
Thank you for your attention, and we will now answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Reid. We appreciate that. We're going to now move to the next witness, Neil Davis, for 5 minutes or less.
Mr. Chair, I don't have any opening remarks beyond those made by Ms. Reid.
Okay.
Yes, excuse me, Mr. Chair. Just I am responding on behalf of the three witnesses.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Reid. We'll now proceed then to the questions. And for 6 minutes or less, we'll start with Mr. Arnold.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was expecting more presentation, but I'm glad that we've got more time for questions here. Thank you, Ms. Reid, for your presentation and for being here today to help clarify what has taken place. In your opening remarks, you mentioned the key part of DFO's mandate is to sustainably manage Canada's fisheries. I fully support this statement and mandate, but it's unclear how DFO's reinterpretation that will outlaw tubbing will promote sustainable management of the spot prawn industry. What is clear is that the determination to outlaw tubbing has cast the future of some 600 BC prawn harvesters into great uncertainty. Does DFO have a plan for assisting the harvesters that could be forced to surrender their livelihood because of the department's reinterpretation?
Thank you, Mr. Arnold, for your question. So to be clear, DFO has not outlawed tubbing. What we have done is worked with the industry to clarify the requirements that products be readily available for inspection. And in working with the association, we do have an interim solution in place for this year, which addresses the concerns. And we will be working with them longer term to address the longer term issues around packaging and maintaining regulatory compliance.
But there's no plan beyond just not implementing the interpretation as it was put out this year. No plan for beyond this year?
Well, so the way we work with industry on a regular basis is that we do work with them, collaborate on issues as they arise. And so as I described briefly in my opening comments, this issue has become more prevalent of late. And so the question around whether products are readily available is something that was discussed in a meeting a few months ago. And based on that interaction, protocol was determined for this year. There are some reasons why, because of the time of year, we need some longer term solutions, and we would fully intend to work with industry on those solutions.
Okay, well, I'm not surprised that the department has no transition plan for British Columbians that are forced off the water. When we look at the Discovery Islands decisions delivered last December, this government has still not provided a plan for British Columbians that are being forced not to work in that sector. Do you think it would be appropriate for DFO and government to have a transition plan in place before they put BC jobs on notice? So
with regards to this prawn issue, I think that we found a very reasonable solution that addresses the concerns identified by the industry and also meets our regular requirements to inspect and inspect the product as required.
Thank you. As you're aware, many fish stocks in the Pacific region are in decline and some near collapse. I believe that many of these dire situations could be improved if DFO Pacific listened and acted on the input they are provided by British Columbians. Do you think that this whole spot prawn fiasco could have been prevented had DFO been more diligent in listening to and engaging prawn stakeholders before throwing their futures into disarray?
My view is the process as I described it followed an issue was raised. There was a discussion around it. Certainly concerns were identified, and then DFO and the industry reps worked together to resolve the issue, which they have done. So in my view, DFO and industry can't avoid encountering issues or concerns, but we can find ways to work collaboratively together. And in my view, that's what we've done in this case.
Okay, it's been interesting hearing your explanations for reinterpretation and the tubbing regulation today, but no one from DFO, including the minister, provided all of these explanations earlier in the year when the fiasco came to light. Is there a reason why the explanations you've brought today were not offered to the Canadians in March?
Well, I can't answer specifically to that other than to say we did have conversations with the industry representatives. We have a regular advisory process. Those meetings took place, and it was through that we worked on the solution. So in my view, we did have those conversations, and we did attempt to clarify our needs for the regulatory compliance and understanding the interests of the industry to ensure that their markets were protected.
Okay, thank you. Also in your opening remarks, you mentioned that the size limit also allows prawns to reach sexual maturity before they're being harvested, which supports the regeneration of stocks over long term. This contradicts with some of the other testimony we've heard, and it seems we have possibly yet another interpretation on our hands here. Are you aware that female prawns start breeding at a size greater than 33 millimeters, which is above the minimum size limit?
So if what I would suggest, Ms. Arnold, if I could ask Neil Davis to talk about all the various management techniques used to manage prawns sustainably, I think we can talk about size limits and spawner indexes and other relevant factors.
Just to note, there's about 15 seconds for a quick response.
Or very briefly, I think I would just say that there is, with any species, some variability around when and the size at which they may spawn. But in general, our view is that the size limit supports or helps to support the objective of getting these prawns large enough to spawn before they are available for harvest.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. And now we'll go to Mr. Hardy for 6 minutes or less.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the officials for being here. We heard that tubbing had been a practice in place for decades. So what changed? Did the tubs change? Or was this just somebody who had a light go on over their head and say, gee, we need to reinterpret this because it seemed so capricious, so last minute, and so arbitrary? Ms. Reid, can you speak to that, please?
I can, Mr. Hardy. And also if I could suggest that Nicole Gallant also have an opportunity to respond. But I will say that the incident of tubbing, the use of tubbing has gone up recently. And so from a relatively uncommon practice where there was a higher reliance on sort of export markets and those types of packaging with the prevalence of COVID and turning towards domestic markets and the meetings that were held with the industry, there was a reflection on the intention to use tubbing as more commonly to benefit from those domestic markets. And it was in that context that the conversation around the regulatory requirements about products being readily available for inspection was discussed. And that's where this issue really was raised initially, was based on those consultations.
Well, I don't know that consultation would be an apt word, because certainly the moment that the word came down that tubbing was to be forbidden, and a lot of people had the definite impression that the interdiction was immediate, that it just simply wasn't going to be allowed, and it took a while to kind of extract the information that there would be some latitude. So you say that tubbing prevents the product from being readily available, and yet we hear from the fishers that they can take a tub and they can thaw it out on the deck in a couple of minutes and give an inspector, a very good look at what's inside the tub. What's wrong with that?
So perhaps it'd be useful to talk about the protocol that was agreed to, which addresses some of those concerns.
No, I would like an answer to that question first, please.
But I think that is that really is my attempt to answer the question. Is that there's a number of issues around. If you've got a frozen tub of prawns, you need to be able to assess the size. You can't do that if they're tucked in that frozen seawater. So you need to be able to thaw the tub quickly enough so that it's effective. There's questions around sort of how that works when you're on a boat, those types of issues. And so I think there were a number of concerns raised about sort of how this was going to work and whether the product was readily available, what would happen to the product afterwards, because once it's warmed up or thawed, it's going to be destroyed, be ruined. And so there were questions of that nature. And so I think that the outcome, the protocol that was agreed to, finds a solution that addresses some of those concerns and was acceptable for both DFO and the industry reps.
Well, I don't know that we've heard from the industry reps that they've landed on something that's accessible. Now, it's been a couple of weeks since we spoke to them. Maybe there's been some new developments, and we'll be interested because they represent our next panel. And I hope that I hear from them that they agree with you. But still, I mean, okay, tubbing's been around for a long time, and you've been thawing it out on the decks for, within a couple of minutes for a long time. Okay, tubbing may have gone up as a percentage of the total catch, but still, how many inspections would you do in say the course of a season? And historically, how many infractions did you find with respect to the size limit?
So with your permission, I'd ask for Nicole Gallant to respond to that around the enforcement measures.
Yes, thank you. I don't know if my mic's working because I can't hear myself, but hopefully it works. So fishery officers inspect the commercial prawn fleet throughout the season, and rarely do we actually have to thaw or have seen tubbing take place on board the vessels. Usually what the product we're seeing is live product that is easy to measure and product that is finger packed in boxes. So rarely have we seen that, and the number of undersized product that we have come across and or product that we're concerned about in the last 3 years, we have run into about 2 violations out of 41 violations per year.
So, I see. So 41 violations, but only 2 of them involve size. And I guess, it would be, we would find general agreement that, the size matters to the fishers because the little ones have no real value to them. They have no incentive to keep undersized prawns because people don't want to buy them. I don't know if that's a fair question to you or to Ms. Reid.
Well, I think that from a sustainability perspective, we agree that undersized prawns are something we want to avoid. And so certainly there are management measures put in place, other ones aside from just directly inspection, to avoid those undersized. But there's also an obligation for us to enforce the regulations, and the size limit is something that is important. And so when officers encounter a situation, they will take action. And so I think there's general agreement that larger prawns are better for the market and certainly better for the sustainability of the stocks. And so that's why we're inspecting, to ensure there's no illegal capture of those undersized fish.
Thank you, Ms. Reid, and thank you, Mr. Hardy. We're going to move to Madam Gill for 6 minutes or less.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to our witnesses who are with us today. We very much appreciate your answers. I have a question with respect to the background, the history of this issue. I saw on the Atlantic side difficulties with the fishery being endangered. But I'd like to know when you started to discuss the concerns that you have expressed in DFO. What date did you start discussing this? What date was the decision taken? And what date did you inform the fishers on? So I'd like to know the exact. When did you discuss it? When was the decision taken? And when was the information given to the harvesters before the beginning of the season? Either Madam Reid, Mr. Davis, or Madam Gallant?
Thank you, Madam Gill. I think I'll ask Neil to describe the process as it occurred.
Sure. Thanks, Rebecca. So I think as Rebecca mentioned in her opening remarks, this issue sort of emerged somewhat inadvertently through conversations on a related topic between DFO and industry on matters of packaging and labeling. And in a conversation with that group in late January, there was discussion about the increasing importance of tubbing, particularly with the pandemic and its effects on international markets for other product forms. And I think the expectation on the part of industry
I don't like to interrupt you, Mr. Davis, but given that I don't have much time, just give me the dates. You say at the end of January for the discussion, but when exactly did you make the decision?
So we began meeting with industry in early February when they raised this issue to our attention. And through the course of probably 6, 7, 8, 9 meetings between February and April, we had a discussion about potential options that led to our support for the protocol that was developed by the Pacific Prawn Fishermen's Association in April, and the association communicated that out to their members in April. And then I think the members may be aware that earlier in May, the minister also issued a news release that confirmed that support for the broader public.
When exactly then did the fishery season begin? Can you give me a date for the beginning of the season, approximately?
The fishery opened on May 14th.
May 14. So you're saying that they were consulted because in the meetings that we've had earlier, the industry didn't seem to have been consulted. And if I've understood correctly, you are saying that it was at the request of the industry that you met. It was the industry itself that issued or expressed fears with respect to the method of freezing and conserving the shrimp on the boat. So it is the industry itself that have expressed its concerns. I want to know, I don't want to, this isn't a leading question. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yeah, so you're right. I mean, the industry did raise concerns, given the concern that DFO had raised about the potential for not meeting our regulatory requirements. What we did is very quickly acknowledged that this was an issue of great concern to the industry and immediately began this series of meetings with them to talk about the nature of the issue and what we might be able to do to resolve it, both in the immediate term, but also for the longer term. Hence that series of meetings that began essentially immediately after we had heard from them about those concerns.
So what you're saying is this. The representatives of the fishers who were fearing that they would not be complying with the rules. Is that it? Also, But once, or was it that once you talked to them, that they felt that they wouldn't be complying? So once again, I don't have a very clear answer, and this is why I'm asking you the question in another way. Was it motivated by their fear to not be in compliance, or was this to settle the issue? This is what I'm hearing you say, but I want to be sure.
Well, so I think the issue was raised, right, in those initial discussions that happened in the course of discussions on another matter. When that issue was raised, I think both the department and industry recognized that there was a problem here. Industry expressed their concern about the possibility that what they expected to do as part of their fishing.
And the possibility was what? What was it, this possibility? You haven't named it. You said it was a concern, but you didn't express what the concern was. What was the concern on the part of the industry? What subject?
Thank you, Madam Gill. Maybe.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I have other questions. Thank you, though, to the witnesses.
Madam Gill, and we'll maybe they'll be able to respond in a future session. But now it's over to Mr. Johns for 6 minutes or less. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my concern is I still haven't heard a good reason why you've, redefined reinterpreted the regulations around this. Can you I just want a quick answer, yes or no, that the reason you're doing this is because of the size, that you're worried about, that you can't access tubbing, you can't thaw it out, look at it, and you're worried about size. That's what you're measuring.
So I'm sorry, but I would have to disagree with the characterization of reinterpreting the rules. The rules have been in place, and we haven't changed them at all.
But your concern is around size, that you're checking for size, and that's what you're looking for.
So our concern is whether the product is readily available for inspection.
Okay.
What we're trying to inspect is size.
Right. So you had 41 violations on the whole coast for prawns on the prawn fishery. Only 2 of them were size related. Can you clarify?
So I turn to Nicole to talk about the stats.
Yes, that's correct. There's on average 41 violations per year in the prawn fishery. The prawn fishery is a very short fishery, lasting about 4 to 5 weeks. And on average, it's about 2 violations per year. We have not seen one 2020 or 2021 at the moment.
Okay. I find this deeply alarming that the reinterpretation, or let's call it, maybe the rules have been in place, but they've been served notice, the prawn fishers. This is upsetting the livelihood of people up and down our coast because of 2 violations a year on average. This is completely unacceptable as far as I can say. Can I ask why the person who's most knowledgeable and experienced in overseeing the management of this prawn fishery, that's been overseeing it for almost 15 years, is not here in attendance to answer questions?
I'm sorry, who are you talking about, Mr. Johns?
So I think, right now I would be asking about the person that's been overseeing the prawn fishery, and it's Lori.
Lori Conby?
Yeah.
We do try and bring senior people to these meetings. And so Neil Davis is the Regional Director for Fisheries Management, and thought it appropriate that he be the witness for this meeting.
Okay. Mr. Davis, you talked about conservation being an issue, and size limit. Can you explain, why, this is a conservation issue? Several issues come to mind. Where's the stock assessment report to support the allegation that conservation is an issue in this fishery? And secondly, why is there no science representative present as a witness that could provide clarification of this allegation? And also, maybe you could advise this committee which scientific report or stock assessment advised the end of tubbing.
Sure, I can certainly help with those questions. So just on your last point, to be clear, again, that we have not banned tubbing. If tubbing can occur in a way that allows for the size limit to be readily determined, then it can proceed. And that's the discussion that we are pursuing with industry about what our options might be for the longer term around that. With respect to, the role of size limits in ensuring the sustainability of the fishery, or whether conservation is a concern, I think regardless of the fishery, we we actually prefer to manage more proactively so that conservation of the stock does not become a concern. And the role of the size limit in the case of the prawn fishery helps in that regard, in that it allows for the prawns to reproduce, or it at least supports them growing large enough to reproduce before they are harvested. And it also allows them to grow to a larger size that has more economic value per pound, both of which are good things, and both of which have enjoyed the support of industry over the course since their introduction in the 80s.
Do you have any reports that can back up the concerns that you have, that you could provide this committee? What I just asked about around the concerns, and it also readily available. Do you not see tubbing as readily available?
It may be, but what we have not done is had that conversation in more detail. So much as Rebecca was alluding to earlier, tubbing was, at least to the department's knowledge, not a frequent practice until recently. And so issues like, well, what is a tub? What's its size? What's its shape? What color is it? There's no standardization around that, which wouldn't allow us to make a subsequent determination of whether it can be made readily determined in a way that will meet the needs of our enforcement officers.
So you're saying right now that you've been consulting industry. Industry saying that they weren't consulted till months after that they were served notice around this, that that around the, well, I guess we can't get a clear answer about whether you're going to say that it was readily available or it's always been in place, but the changes that were coming, and now you're saying that we don't even know if there's changes coming. People are looking for answers. They're looking for answers from government. I'm not hearing good answers. What are you offering? What is it that you're suggesting the industry do? Because we were hoping today that you'd be telling us about some of the recommendations and some of the suggestions that they could apply moving forward so they can get this off their plate and get back to fishing and feeding their families.
We have time for about 15-second answer. It has to be a quick answer here.
We do have an interim protocol in place that was developed by industry, and using that, we can discuss practices going forward. And
so status quo is the interim protocol?
No, it's not status quo. They came up with a protocol to respond to the concerns, and we agreed that it was acceptable. So to me,
thank you, Ms. Reed. Thank you, Mr. Johns. We'll now move on to our second round of questions, and Mr. Calkins, it's for yours for 5 minutes or less.
Well, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, Acting Chair, in your new role. I want to thank the Department of Fisheries and Oceans for doing something that not even the COVID-19 pandemic could do, which is bring the 4 political parties together unanimously in agreement about something that appears to be an egregious overstep on behalf of the government. I've never seen this in the 15 years that I've been an MP, where there's absolutely nobody sitting around the table that's elected that is in agreement with what the government has done. And I've heard no such justification that would change anybody's mind at this particular point in time. The first question I have is there any indication that prawn populations are in decline because of tubbing?
So I think, first of all, to the committee, we are doing our best to respond to your questions. I'm sensing a lot of frustration and concern, but the issue around tubbing is one about products being readily available. That regulation is across the board, so it's not just related to prawns. It applies in this case, and it was raised as part of a separate conversation because the prevalence of tubbing is becoming more common. It was raised as an issue about we need to make sure we can inspect the product. What is the way to do that? And that led to the conversation about, is it possible with tubs or not? And then ultimately the development of the interim protocol. And so for me, the issue was raised, it was discussed appropriately with the association. A solution was found, which we agreed to. We need to continue to work together. And this is a very typical process in working with industry reps. Issues are raised, we work on them, and we do our best.
But that doesn't answer my question,
them.
Ms. Reed. My question was, is there any indication that prawn populations are in decline because of tubbing?
So the question makes the premise that tubbing is causing a conservation concern, and that's not the case. It's not the intention, and it's not the
You
nature of our
failed to make the point that you have an enforcement issue. I'm a former conservation officer. I'm a former national park warden. I understand fully the idea of leaving things marked so that they're easily accessible for law enforcement. You've told me that you've had a whopping 2 out of 41 on average, a case where if it's not a case of conservation concern, which it clearly is not, because size does not matter when it comes to prawns for conservation, which is something that has already been admitted here, then there must be a reason for doing this that meets some type of conservation or some other type of rationale for enforcement. And I've heard of whopping 2 cases out of 41 charges that are laid on average every year. And then I've heard some startling things coming out of the mouths of some of the people here saying that the regulatory changes were made to meet the needs of enforcement. I thought perhaps maybe we would just meet the needs of the fishermen to the best of our ability and let them carry on with their lives and their livelihoods. So I guess the question I have then is, do the fishers refuse, or are they remain non-compliant when they're asked to thaw a tub?
There have been no regulatory changes made. These regulations have been in place since 1993. And when asked to inspect the product, the fishermen are compliant, and Nicole can speak to that more specifically. But this isn't a question about whether people are resisting in the enforcement or the inspection. It's about how to produce the product.
But you just told me. You just told this committee that it's not a conservation issue and that there's nothing threatening the populations. I've heard from Mr. Davis that it needs to meet the changes that are being made to meet the needs of enforcement. I've heard your enforcement official basically say that there's a whopping 2 fines levied every year for not meeting the size requirements. I've also heard your enforcement person say that most of the enforcement actually happens when the prawns are live and not when they're in the tub environment at all. So, I mean, we're just going around in circles here, and nothing that you're saying is adding up or making any sense to justify or rationale what's happening here. So, I'm asking very, very basic questions. Look, maybe you can answer this one. How long does it take, on average, for a fisherman when asked to thaw a tub?
So, how
long does that take?
I would, if it's possible, I'd like to address the issue that you raised before around conservation, because I think that's the key. We don't need a conservation concern before we take actions to protect the sustainability of a fishery. And so we don't wait.
So these are the only prawns in Canada that are regulated by size for conservation, because everybody that knows anything about prawn and prawn lifestyle knows that size isn't usually the determining factor in the ability of prawns that start out as males for the first couple of years of their life and switch to females. Which is why we throw buried females back in the water when we're fishing them. Everybody knows that life cycle, so you can't say it's conservation. I just asked you the question, the very first question I asked, is there any indication that prawn populations are in decline because of anything that's happening? And nobody said yes.
Well, so what I'm trying to...
Thank you, Mr. Calkins. Very quick answer, Ms. Reid, just like 5 seconds, 10 seconds. Yeah.
Conservation... size limit is an important part of ensuring conservation, but it's not the only measure that we put into place. And so it's one factor of many that we use to ensure a sustainable fishery.
Thank you, Ms. Reid. And now we're going to move to Mr. Morrissey for 5 minutes or less. Thank you.
I believe it was my colleague, Mr. Cormier, Mr. Chair, is next.
Okay, yep. Sorry. Okay, Mr. Cormier.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I wouldn't believe that you forgot a New Brunswicker just like you, but it's totally okay. Look, listen, to all of the witnesses, you're saying that there's a lot of frustration. Well, of course, because we're getting the calls from those fishermen. We're getting the calls from the industry that are trying to understand what happened. And right now, so far, I don't get any answer. So I just want to come back. You said that there was 41 violation and 2 size limit only that was related to those relations. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so you mean for only 2 size violation, you want to change a fishing that was going on for many years in a matter of, I think, like 2 months. Like, I'm not sure if you know, but my father was a fisherman all his life. Changing the way you fish doesn't happen in the night. You have to have time to organize yourself. You have to have time, to prepare your gear, everything. Like, for example, on the East Coast, we're fishing lobster here. If there's some size violation, we find those people, and some are getting to court, and we don't change the way that they measure the lobster the year after. So I just want to make sure why, if there was only 2 violations like that you want to change a process that's been going on for a year, because it seems that there is no conservation issue whatsoever. So why are you changing, the rules like all of a sudden like that, and giving no time to industry to prepare themselves? It's just like asking them, to mow their lawn with a snow blower during the summer. Like, it will take time to adapt, right? So
if I could respond to that, the answer is because we're not asking for a change. What we've said is this is the practice that's been in place, the expectation that's been in place all along. And so we don't see a change. What's changed is the increased use of tubbing. And so what that means is we need to make sure we reflect on how to properly inspect those products. We're not asking for a change in fishing. We've come up with a protocol to allow the use of tubbing. We continue to want to enforce the size limits as an important part of conservation. That hasn't changed. None of that has changed.
Okay, but you inspected those prawns for many, many years, right? So you still want to change the way that they're used tubbing, if I can say so.
So I would say, so what Nicole said is that use of tubbing was very uncommon. And there are other ways that the prawns are kept. So either live or frozen, like finger packed frozen, so easily, readily available. And those are very easy to inspect. And so it's just the tubbing that's hard to inspect, because the prawns are hidden in the ice, and you need to be able to thaw them. And so it's that part of it that, if there's going to be an increase in prevalence because of a change in markets, that we need to make sure that the practices we do, the protocols, allow us to inspect the product. That's really what we're interested in.
Okay, so you said that you met with the industry in February, right? And the fishing season is starting in May, right?
That's right.
So again, like, how can an industry, prepare themselves for those changes in a short period of time? Like, for some of them, I'm not sure how long the season is, but again, like, fishermen are making their living in sometime 1 month, 2 months. Like, don't you think that last minute decision like that should be planned way ahead? Like, I've seen some decision in the East Coast here also that is very problematic. Like, why making a decision like that, or trying to change something like in a period of 2 weeks? Like, it seems to happen a lot with this department.
Well, I would say, first of all, there hasn't been a change. This practice has been in place. And second of all, the industry has responded appropriately. We have gotten agreement on the protocol, and we have a way forward, and the fishery has started. And you're right, it is a very short fishery. So we're glad that we've got the protocol in place to respond to the interest for this year.
Okay, so what about next year? What's the plan for next year?
So for next year, we need to continue to work with industry on some of the issues that Neil raised about. So if tubbing is the preferred packaging, then let's talk about what that looks like. And going forward, how can we come up with methodologies to make sure that the fish is readily inspected? And what does that look like? And there's going to be conversations with industry, and I'm sure we can find a solution.
Okay, I think my time is up, or pretty much, Mr. Chair, but on my timer, yeah.
You're pretty close. Thank you, Mr. Cormier. Well done. And thank you, Ms. Reed. Now we're going to go to Madam Gill for 2.5 minutes or less. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I have questions on the inspections. Several members of the committee have said that there were only 2 violations out of 41 that dealt with the size of the prawns. And I think that this was over a 3-year period, if I'm not mistaken. How many inspections have been done annually during the 4-week fishing season? That could be either of the witnesses today that answer my question. I don't know if anybody has the answer.
I can look up the stats. I don't have them at my fingertips at the moment, but they are on my computer. I just have to open them up. Right now, I can give you an example of a 1-day period And
si vous souhaitez, vous pouvez envoyer les...
But if you like, you could send the committee that information in writing so we could continue our discussion here. I'd also like to know, Mrs. Reid had said there was no change on quite often, and you've spoken about the time that was very long that it took to defrost and unfreeze the prawns. Well, what the fishers told us, it took around 2 minutes to thaw the prawns. So how much time can that take over the course of a year for thawing? I'd like to have an idea of how many minutes or hours that would represent. Have you perhaps accelerated this measurement of the prawns because of that?
So I think, Madame Gill, that's exactly the point, is that the industry came up with a methodology to rapidly thaw the prawns that DFO found to be acceptable. So we could work with them. The fishery officers could inspect readily. We could look at the prawns. And so that methodology that perhaps the next panel will speak to really does sort of address the question about, we had a concern. We raised it to the organization. They were worried about what that meant.
Mais
we worked together
nous parlaient de la précédente.
Yeah, but they were talking about precedents. It was satisfactory in the past, but the 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes that it took to thaw them before there were any discussions about changing the methodology or the protocol. So I was just wondering how you could improve from the perspective of time alone, the possibility of making your inspections. How much time would be gained? How much time?
Thank you, Madam Gill. And if you just have a quick response, Ms. Reid, just very quick.
So we have an agreed upon protocol that both industry and DFO accepts as acceptable. And so I think that the solution has been arrived at for this season. And so I think, we have addressed the concern that was raised both by the officers and by industry.
Thank you, Ms. Reid. And now to Mr. Johns for 2.5 minutes or less.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Reid, you talked about an increase in tubbing. Can you talk about what the percentages of the increase, what the numbers look like?
I cannot specifically, but I could ask Nicole to speak to that, please.
I actually would think that Mr. Davis would probably be better to speak to that.
Sure. I'm happy to. So we don't collect data that will give us a definitive answer, but we do have estimates from industry. And the estimate from industry is that it's gone from up to about 10% of the catch, say, last year, with an expectation that it may grow substantially again this year to as high as something like 20%.
Wow. So we're doing this whole thing based on an estimate of 10 to 20%, potentially an estimate. We don't even know. You're not even keeping track. There's no report, no information. We talk about a protocol agreement in place with the industry right now that my understanding is that 3 tubs would be readily available. And if there was undersized, that you would inspect more. That sounds fair. Everybody would be fine, I think, moving forward if that was the rules of engagement for decades to come. But the protocol isn't good enough, or we actually wouldn't be here. I can assure you of that. Industry wants more definitive answers on this. Now, my concern is the minister cited conservation on this, yet it isn't a conservation issue. So I'm asking you, will you back down on, putting pressure on the industry, sticking with the protocol in place right now in years to come, or is the minister actually pressuring you to keep putting pressure on the industry and keep the uncertainty and unfairness to these families and the coast at risk because of 2 violations?
So I would say that the prawn industry is economically very important to British Columbians and to local communities. So there's no question about our interest in ensuring we have a sustainable fishery. And so the long-term solution is simply something we need to work with industry to arrive at. We did this year, and I'm certain we will in the future. We need to collaborate with them and work with them on this issue. And so I think we can. We need some time to talk about it further. We've got a solution right now, and we need to continue to work with them as we do when issues are raised on any matter of concern.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. Thank you, Mr. Johns. And now we're going to go to Mr. Mazer for 5 minutes or less.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Reed, this committee has heard many times that the decisions made by DFO without consultation are having damaging impacts to the people and the communities who depend on Canadian fisheries. However, you mentioned the important role of consultation and collaboration in your remarks. Does DFO have any standards for consulting with parties affected by DFO decisions?
We have consultation practices. So we have a regular advisory process for each of the industries, and we work collaboratively with them. We have managers who are specialized in particular species, and they work and develop relationships with industry reps and others. And so in that way, I think we have a very rigorous consultative process across the board. And in this case, we have a strong consultative process, advisory process in place. Thank you.
Does DFO, as a follow-up, does DFO have any standards for consulting with parties affected by the DFO decisions?
So by standards, I'm not sure what exactly you're looking for, but I will say that we have regular advisory processes with industry. We also meet with others, the recreational sector and Indigenous groups on issues of importance and concern. And so we have people assigned to the task. And so in that way, we have regular advisory processes which allow for this consultative process to occur.
And then how does DFO determine if they've actually consulted enough?
Well, so we work with industry all the time. There's back and forth about this. If industry has concerns, we are responsive to them. We do want to work with them. We want to have a sustainable fishery. And so in that way, I'm not hearing any concerns that we haven't been consulting enough with industry. I'm hearing concerns that about how the issue was raised on this tubbing issue. But in general, our advisory processes with industry, I think, are rigorous. We have a regular process that we follow. We have an integrated fisheries management plan that we develop every year. We consult on the content of that plan and on the fishing plan, and it takes place every year regularly.
So what do you have to say to all the harvesters, the businesses, First Nation communities, and the people who feel blindsided by this decision of DFO? Like, what are you telling them, and what would you say to them?
So what I'll say is that we haven't banned tubbing. We have agreed on a protocol to inspect products to make sure that the size limits are respected. And we believe in having a sustainable fishery, and size limits are an important part of how we ensure conservation and manage for sustainability.
Okay, I still have time, Jerry. You mentioned the importance of sustainability in the prawn harvest. So does tubbing limit the sustainability of prawn industry? And if so, is there any scientific basis for this conclusion?
So the concern around tubbing is around whether the product can be readily available for inspection. That's the concern. So there's no concern about freezing prawns in seawater other than you can't see it to see if it's meeting the size limits. And so if you can find a methodology to assess size limits, then the issue is resolved. And that's what the protocol does, is it sets out a protocol to allow for a ready inspection to ensure size limits are being respected.
So, but my question was, does tubbing limit the sustainability of the prawn industry? And is there any scientific evidence to prove that?
And so again, it's not the tubbing, it's the size limits that we're trying to ensure. And so the issue with tubbing is you can't readily inspect the product. And so if you can resolve that issue, then the actual what package you put the fish in or the prawns in is not a concern. It's whether it's readily available for inspection.
Okay, how am I doing, Chair?
You've got about 30 seconds there, Mr. Mazer.
Okay, well, the Prawn Industry Caucus told this committee about the economic impact that frozen at sea prawns have to the people and who harvest them, and what they go to, how the local businesses rely on them. If DFO follows through with prohibiting tubbing, what is the transition plan for those 600 families that depend on spot prawn harvests in BC?
So what I would say is that DFO intends to work with the industry to find ways to readily inspect product. And the issue of tubbing isn't banned. We just need to find a way to readily inspect the product.
Okay, I'm good. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Mazur. And I believe we have time for one final round here, one final questioner, Mr. Morrissey, for 5 minutes or less before we wrap up this segment of testimony.
Thank you, Chair. My question is to the three DFO officials that are appearing before the committee. You can sense the almost unanimous frustration of the members of this committee. And you repeatedly stated that you're not imposing any change, but you certainly caused a lot of anxiety amongst fishers by the move you initiated this past winter. And you interchanged, Ms. Reid, several times. You come back to conservation and size. And we had witnesses, fishers before this committee, who stated that they've been using this method for 50 years and that the stocks, there's not a question with stocks. So then I'm going back to, you keep repeatedly going back to readily available for inspection. You didn't answer. How much time does it take to thaw a tub of prawns?
And so I did try to suggest that we explain the protocol, because the protocol will answer that question specifically.
No, my question is to you, Ms. Reid. How much time does it take to thaw a tub of prawns?
Right. And so the answer to that is it depends on a number of factors that need to be taken into account. So if you have
give me a range then, Ms. Reid. Give me a range. Time. Is it 5 minutes? Is it 10 minutes? How long does it take?
So I haven't thawed a tub of prawns myself.
No, but you're the senior person in DFO. That basically the whole issue we've been hearing before this committee is the readily available ability to inspect a tub of frozen prawns by your officials.
You would need to know the size of the tub. So is it 1 pound? Is it 10 pounds? What temperature is it frozen at? How long, what's the exterior temperature? What kind of thawing process are you going to use? Are you going to use water? Are you going to use boiling water? And
well,
so
let's go to the simplest one. Anyhow, you seem to be waffling all around.
I'm not waffling. I'm just trying to point out that there's a number of different factors.
Ms. Reid, from my listening of the evidence that we've been getting, the answers is not satisfactory. It seems to be waffling all around the edges here. We have an industry that is quite mature. We have an industry that appears relatively regulated. We have heard no evidence given by your officials that violations is a serious issue that's affecting conservation and stock. So it appears as an interpretation, which I fully understand. But let me correct. Is there not a methodology that you could use that identifies a frozen tub of prawns to the vessel that caught it? We use it on the East Coast extensively. It's called traceability. And then if you can identify the tub of prawns to a vessel, it would make no difference how long it takes to thaw those prawns, or where. Once you documented you took them out of a particular vessel, then from an enforcement perspective, if there's prawns in that tub that you seized, you should be able to relate that back to the vessel. So the time to thaw should not be an issue. Would I be correct?
So I think you're raising some excellent points around standardization of tubs, and I think that should be part of a future protocol.
But Ms. Reid, really, it's an academic question, standardization of tubs. Whether I have a 1 pound or 2 pounds, so it may take 2 minutes to thaw one, 4 minutes to thaw another. It's an academic question, it really doesn't come into the fishery. So what you have here, what I see is the proverbial sledgehammer to kill a fly, where DFO has swept in with enforcing regulations that it has the authority to do in a fishery that is seeking out the most lucrative market it can in this time, which is the ability to go directly to the consumer, which makes sense. We want the fisher to get the maximum amount of gain. We should be there working with them to get in, and it doesn't appear, there's no evidence been given to this committee why DFO would have reacted so fast and forcefully in the past several months that really upset this industry. And And when I pose specific questions, that's why I say, I get waffling around the periphery.
Well, there's no question that people are upset, and
Yes, we understand that, Ms. Reid. We had them before this committee.
But I would say
upset.
that the issue was raised, and within 2 months it was resolved, and the fishery hadn't opened yet. The fishery is now open.
Okay, who raised the issue? You referenced several times that the issue was raised with DFO. Who raised the issue with DFO that forced your department to take a look at how it's enforcing the regulation? Who raised the issue?
So I wasn't part of that meeting, but I can ask Neil to describe.
No, Ms. Reid, that's not an acceptable answer. Yeah. I asked a question. I want the answer to it.
I'm attempting to answer the question, but I assume you'd like to hear it directly rather than
sure, fine. Well,
thank you. Yeah, our time for that has expired. Thank you, Mr. Morrissey. Maybe Mr. Davis, if you want to give one quick answer to that.
It's important, Chair, that we find out who raised the issue with DFO that led to this.
The conservation the conservation and protection officers that were part of that working group on traceability and packaging raised the issues when industry had noted the expectation that prawn tubbing would continue to be more important to them.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Thank you, Mr. Morrissey. And look, just before we wrap up this segment, I had received a question, and I'm fine with allowing each party representative to ask one more question, but that's it, one question and one answer each. If that's the will of the committee, I am fine with allowing one more here with the department. Do I have thumbs up on that? Are we okay? All right. Okay, good. We'll go one more round, and we're going to start here with I believe Mr. Arnold. One question, and we'll work our way through. Oh, you're on mute, Mr. Arnold.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the opportunity for one more question. Ms. Reid, we've heard today that there were 2 incidents of infractions regarding size for prawns. We haven't heard how many inspections were actually done, only that 42 fines in total were listed, but obviously probably many more inspections were done. And then we had a sudden change in interpretation. How many infractions of illegal nets and illegal fishing were identified on the Fraser River last year that affected at-risk steelhead and at-risk salmon? And how many fines were laid, and what actions has your department taken to stop the illegal, unreported, unregulated fishing that's taking place on the Fraser?
Well, I can ask Nicole to speak to the statistics, but we may need to get back to you on those particular numbers.
Yeah, again, I do not have the statistics at my fingertips for the Fraser River. I would have to get back to you on that one if the committee so chooses.
Thank you. I will now go to Mr. Hardy. I believe it would be Mr. Hardy this next, unless there's someone else. Yeah. Okay, Mr. Hardy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Ms. Reid, we heard that prior to the pandemic and the world market slowing down, tubbing accounted for about 10% of the catch. During the pandemic, you've noticed it's gone up to 20%. But it would seem reasonable to suspect that it's going to go back down again, because those international markets are much more lucrative than the domestic market. So why do we need to do this when the number of infractions are low? We don't expect tubbing to actually increase in its, the frequency of activity once things get back to normal. Is it not possible, ma'am, for you to simply say, you know what, nice try, not working, let's just do an Etch-a-Sketch on this thing and go back?
Quick answer here, Ms. Reid. Thank you.
Well, I think we actually have found a reasonable solution that addresses the concerns. And so for me, being able to actually, implement the regulation is an appropriate measure for us to take.
Thank you, Ms. Reid. Madam Gill, just for clarity's sake, we're trying to keep this to within 1 minute for each segment here. So, Madam Gill, one question.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to reiterate for Mr. Davis the question that I didn't receive an answer to, or at least I didn't understand the answer. I want to know if the Fishers or was it their representatives that asked the department to proceed with that change?
Ça se répond par un oui ou un non.
Just yes or no.
I'm not sure I understand the question, but industry raised the concern, which we then worked with them to resolve.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. And now for our final question in this
Donc,
round.
c'est bien.
So it was industry that asked for change. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Gill. And thank you, Mr. Davis. And now to Mr. Johns for the final 1 minute segment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and appreciate getting the chance to ask this question. We hear about, they're talking about deep freezing 10-pound containers, but they come in 1-pound tubs. And the 3-tub recommendation that you're putting forward for this season, I think if you had put that forward for future years, we probably we wouldn't be studying this right now, because clearly that's an easy solution. But you cited that there was 2 violations on average a year. I guess my question is, how many of those violations on size limits were frozen at sea prawns? I'd like to know how many of them were frozen at sea prawns. And was the minister fully briefed because and supporting this decision moving forward that has put everyone's livelihoods up in the air?
So Nicole can respond to this statistical question, but as far as the issue around interpretation of the regulations, certainly once industry flagged their concern, we did advise the minister. She's aware, and you're aware that there was a news release responding to kind of the outcome of the process that was arrived at.
For this year, but not for future years.
Well, we intend to continue to work with the industry for future years, and we haven't precluded the outcome. So we haven't said it's going to be this or that. We're going to say we're going to work with industry on developing that solution.
Thank you, Ms. Reid. Thank you, Mr. Johns. Thank
Mr.
you, everyone.
Chair, could I just get an answer on the question I asked about the around the violations? How many of the 2 violations a year were frozen at sea prawns? Of the 2 on average?
Both of them were. And when inspected, one of the tubs or one of the violations had 51% undersize in the frozen tubs.
Thank you.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Calkins.
Before we adjourn this particular section of the meeting, I just wanted to ensure that the commitments that were made by the witnesses during this portion of the committee that had suggested that they could provide answers if it was the committee's willingness to want them. I would like the witnesses to interpret that as yes. So we don't ask questions as members of Parliament unless we actually want an answer to it. And I just want to say, Mr. Chair, before this particular discussion is over with these witnesses, that it's been a long time where I've seen what appears to be such indifference to the questions that have been asked by members of Parliament and the deference that wasn't given to those questions. And the attitude that we're just simply asking the wrong questions and that we need to ask better questions seem to be the response of the witnesses rather than actually answering the questions that were asked. I find this to be appalling behavior in the presence of members of Parliament, and I would hope that we don't see this again.
Thank you, Mr. Calkins, and I'd like to thank the witnesses for being a part of this evening. Thank you, each one, and we're going to take a brief suspension of the meeting. Don't go anywhere, those of you who are members, but we're going to have the next witnesses come on and get sound checked here right away and proceed into the next segment. Thank you, everyone. And I would like to just take a few minutes for the benefit of our next witnesses to go over a few instructions here. When you are ready to speak, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic. And when you are not speaking, your mic should be on mute. Interpretation will work very much like in regular committee meeting. You have a choice at the bottom of your screen of either for English or French. And when speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. And I would now like to welcome our second panel of witnesses. From Skipper Otto Community Supported Fishery, Sonia Strobel, co-founder and chief executive officer. Native Fishing Association, Andy Olson, executive director. And Prawn Industry Caucus, Ivan Asgard, commercial fisherman. We will now hear opening remarks, beginning with Ms. Strobel for 5 minutes or less. Please.
Thank you so much for having me. As you said, my name is Sonia Strobel, co-founder and CEO of Skipper Otto. We're Canada's first community-supported fishery, one of the first in the world, based on Coast Salish territory here in Vancouver, BC. So I married into a fishing family 20 years ago and honestly was horrified to witness the struggles of my father-in-law, Otto, and my husband, Sean, and other small-scale harvesters. They face risks and uncertainties that no one would tolerate in any other livelihood. And at the end of the day, a lot of them just hope to break even, barely paying themselves minimum wage. At the same time, Canadians can scarcely access domestic seafood. Canada exports 90% of its catch, and 80% of what Canadians can buy in restaurants and in retail shops is imported, often from shady sources that support environmental destruction and human rights abuses in unregulated international waters. And yet demand for local producer direct seafood continues to skyrocket. We started Skipper Otto to help take some of the uncertainty out of fishing and to address Canadian food insecurity. Our membership model provides frozen seafood direct from fishing families to consumers across Canada. Now, we do lots of other things to de-risk fishing, but since this is what's core to the issue today, that's where I'll focus my remarks. So freezing seafood allows harvesters to hold onto their product and find their own markets, fair markets, rather than forcing them to sell to live buyers and export markets who won't set a price until long after they've taken your product. Monopolization and collusion are commonplace in this industry. Right now, we're 2 weeks into the spot prawn season, and folks selling into the live markets have already delivered the bulk of this year's catch, but they still haven't been told a price, let alone paid a penny. Not only is allowing the freezing of seafood like spot prawns at sea a social justice issue, it's also critical to improving it's also critical to improving other issues like food security, tackling climate change, addressing seafood fraud. Our model allows members to enjoy sustainable seafood year-round anywhere in the country, shipped using low-carbon methods, and each piece of seafood is like this, showing exactly who caught it, when and where and how. So this committee's heard testimony from many harvesters about the impact of selling frozen at sea spot prawn tails domestically compared to selling to live markets. Last year, that meant that harvesters who tailed, tubbed, and froze their prawns at sea sold them for 300% more than they received by selling them to the live buyer. Skipper Otto supports 34 fishing families like Joel Collier here throughout the BC coast, as well as in 2 remote communities in Nunavut. And these families provide a year's worth of seafood directly over to over 7,000 families across the country, many of whom you heard from through our petitions on this topic. Our members are passionate about supporting Canadian fishing families, and they do that by buying fishermen direct frozen seafood. The spot prawn issue hits them personally, and they're not going to let it drop. In Canada, shrimp and prawns are by far the most consumed species of seafood. Globally, some 5 billion pounds of shrimp and prawns are produced each year. And where does most of that come from? The global shrimp and prawn trade is the most notorious for environmental destruction and human rights abuses. Most of the frozen shrimp you can get in Canadian grocery stores is in some way connected to human trafficking, slavery, and deforestation of mangroves in Southeast Asia. And so, how wonderful that we have this incredibly clean, well-managed, ethically harvested product as an alternative for consumers in Canada to displace some of that dirty product. But this reinterpretation of the regulation around spot prawn tubbing undoes all of that. It takes from fishing families one of the most profitable fisheries they have in a desperately difficult industry to make money in. Once again, it puts the control and the profits back into the hands of big foreign-owned export companies. It takes a sustainable, clean, and ethical product out of the hands of Canadians, making more space for slave-caught shrimp on Canadian shelves. And for what? The DFO has not provided a single plausible reason for this decision. Of course, we all support strong conservation measures, but it has not been demonstrated that this is in any way a conservation issue. Of course, we all want to put an end to IUU fishing and harvesting, but placing the burden of that on all harvesters is unjust and irrational. If a small group of harvesters and processors are violating regulations, then CNP already has the tools in place to focus the enforcement of the regulations without upending the entire industry. Their job is to enforce regulations made by arm's length lawmakers, not to reinvent the laws to make enforcement easier. So please help me to tell our 7,000 member families across the country that this is solved. They are all eagerly awaiting the update on this issue, not just for this year, but for the future. So in conclusion, I submit the following recommendations. One, that you give certainty to harvesters that tailing, tubbing, and freezing prawns at sea will remain legal. And two, that you ensure that our local prawn harvest is protected for Canadian harvesters and consumers and not for the benefit of foreign corporations and investors. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Strobel. I appreciate that. And now we're going to go to Mr. Olson for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, committee members. Chair, thanks for having us to speak about this issue today. My name is Andrew Olson. I'm the Executive Director of the Native Fishing Association. We're an Aboriginal financial institution based in West Vancouver that serves Aboriginal Indigenous fishers all over BC through loans, licenses, and other business assistance as we can. Previously, before I took my job at the Native Fishing Association, I worked for Shop First Nation in Port Alberni as a fisheries manager and fish biologist for them for 10 years. So in that role, I served as a First Nation representative on the Prawn Advisory Board for many years, worked with the Prawn Advisory Board and the Prawn Advisory Committee, which is what it was before it became the Prawn Advisory Board. So I participated in many of those discussions, much of that work, and I never heard of undersized prawns being an issue. This is an issue that, to me, points to some of the other concerns in the Pacific region, and that DFO is being manipulated and used by business, industry in particular. And when they talk about industry and they talk about the PPFA, they are not the industry. That's the commercial processor group of representatives, not the independent commercial fisher representatives. They are represented by the Prawn Industry Caucus, right? So that's one thing that we need to be clear about, is when they're talking about industry, they're referring to the Prawn Fishers Federation Association. So it's two different groups, different participants, and in many instances that larger organization represents the processing companies that are shipping, taking live prawns and shipping them to Asia for a lucrative market, right? And so this shift for fishers wasn't just into tailing and tubbing prawns. It's been a shift to live prawn sales at the dock that has turned the market around for these guys. Their opportunity to fish, even with a strong market, a strong foreign market to ship the seafood to, the fishers were not getting the benefit of that strong foreign market price, and the fishers haven't been, making a high living off of that market, and then having to shift to a lesser market domestically. The domestic market is proven to be able to bear the prices that are potentially higher to the fisher than the international market is providing to them, right? So it's not just a temporary shift. I think it's a long-term shift. And so one of the things that I heard in the earlier panel discussion was a lot about sustainability and size issues and those kinds of things. And it's clear that the committee understands all of those things and is trying to understand what's at the root of this issue and how we can work to support fishers to make a living and protect the resource, which I think we all think is important. so that they can keep fishing, right? So we know that the size of the prawns is more of a marketability issue than it is a conservation issue, that there's not a sustainability concern by harvesting undersized prawns because they're all males. So knowing that, we start to look at what's behind all this stuff. And that's what concerns me the most, is that we've seen again and again in the Pacific region processes and even enforcement programs manipulated by large shareholder corporations, many of them foreign owned, that they use their levers and people that they have influence with to change policy and change the way that fisheries are managed by enforcement action, causing things to be essentially shift immediately, right? They realized they were going to lose access to all these prawns because fishermen saw that they could sell the prawns domestically and make more money selling prawns to their neighbors and friends than selling prawns to a commercial fish plant that is going to pack those into a box and send them to China, right? So all of a sudden, when fish companies start to see that they're going to lose access to a product that they've been making millions and millions and millions of dollars worth sending overseas, they had to do something. And that's my concern, is that this points to that kind of thing and that kind of corruption in the Pacific region, and that we need to get to the bottom of this, and we need to make sure that the fishermen have an opportunity to make a living.
Thank you.
Critically important.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. Appreciate that. And now we're going to go to our final witness testimony, which is from Mr. Asgard for 5 minutes or less.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and bonjour. Hello, all committee members. Really appreciate being asked to speak today. My name is Ivan Asgard. I'm a commercial fisherman. I've fished for 30 years or 40 years for prawns. I own and operate a prawn license and a fishing vessel, as well as I also have a registered storage facility where we're licensed to freeze our prawn tails. I served on the prawn sectoral committee in the 80s and the 90s, where we collaborated with DFO to implement larger mesh size, increase the minimum size, and many other measures to make the fishery more sustainable. And I recall that the Towson length measurement was established back then so that prawn tails frozen in seawater could become a viable product. I'd have to say at this point that consultation back then was far more effective than what we're seeing today. For years, I was investing in technology to catch more fish. A number of years ago, we hit a ceiling for what we could catch. We reached the conclusion that the way to survive is by adding value to the catch, by improving its quality, its convenience for the consumer, and its consistency. We have invested in internet marketing, packaging, cold storage, and distribution systems. I have to say that not all fishermen have reached the stage of advancement that we have. We're independent and we're forward thinking. I also have to say we feel privileged to be able to harvest the common property fisheries resource of Canadians. Canadians rely on us to provide them with food and access to something that they in fact own, but trust us to harvest. And because licensed commercial fishermen rely on the goodwill of Canadians for access to the resource, we've made a point of making some of our catch available to the public over the last 30 or 40 years. It's not only tremendously satisfying, it's good business. There's become so little seafood available direct from the fishermen, even in our little coastal town of Powell River, that our customers routinely thank us profusely for making our product available to them. It's a strong market. For the 20 and 21 prawn fishing seasons, the markets have endured another cyclical crash in the whole frozen markets for export to Japan and China, where 80-90% of our production is destined. The poor prices on this occasion have been blamed on COVID. An earlier witness mentioned extensive collusion in the industry amongst buyers, and I can reaffirm that fact. Fishermen received as little as $3 a pound for their smallest size product last year. Their medium prawns sold into the frozen at sea market, $3 a pound. That's less than the cost of production, I can tell you. This year looks to be the same. So fishermen are trying to make any kind of moves they can to avoid financial ruin. The market crash has promoted innovation by fishermen to adapt. We're not looking for, we want to be able to have certainty, and we want to be able to adapt. We're not looking for any kind of a financial handout, but we do want some certainty. We're trying to create higher value markets by producing frozen prawn tails and selling directly to the public. I can say that this is a long time practice, and one that go to when we've had poor markets in the past. When I first started fishing back in the 80s, there was people back then selling frozen prawn tails. That's how long this practice. It's not a recent practice. It's not this reinterpretation of the policy is not a conservation issue. It's solving a problem that doesn't exist. It's so unjust that my outrage is the reason that I'm appearing here today. There have been no recent charges for fishermen for retaining undersized prawns. We've heard one of the earlier witnesses say that it was about 2 a year. I think there was some confusion there. There was 2 charges in 2019 to my knowledge, and there have been none in 20 or 21 for undersized prawns, although there have been many other charges laid in the fishery. I've spoken with fisheries officer who says that retention of undersized prawn tails in tubs by commercial fishermen is the least of their concerns. I can tell you from practical experience that identifying a fisherman who has retained undersized prawns is a relatively simple matter. All this talk of thawing tubs aside, the tried and true enforcement technique is for the rubber boat to arrive seemingly out of nowhere, and an impromptu investigation of the occurs of the product that is retained on deck. Timed at the end of a haul of a string of traps, DFO can easily go through a large amount of product, about 1/6 or more of that vessel's daily catch, to get a clear assessment of what is being retained by the vessel.
Thank you, Mr. Asgard. Thank you. Just sorry, our time is complete. If you have more you'd like to add, feel free to send that in to us as well. Maybe some of it will come out in the time of questioning. But sorry, our time has lapsed on that. But appreciate hearing from each of you. And now we're going to go to our question and answer period time. And I'm going to ask Mr. Calkins. You now have 6 minutes or less for questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to thank our witnesses for being here today. I'm assuming, can you just raise your hands? I got you all on my screen. Did you actually hear the department officials in the hour just before you came on? Raise your hand if you were able to hear. Okay, I guess my question first then for all of you, and we'll just start in the order in which you presented before. So Strobel and then Mr. Olson and Mr. Asgard. Do you believe anything that the department officials said was accurate and a fair reflection, or do you believe the things that they said were an accurate and fair reflection of the relationship that you've had with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans in regards to the whole issue surrounding prawn tubbing?
No, I don't believe that that's a fair assessment. I don't feel that we've been consulted at all. I do feel that the DFO consults with the Large Industry Association, which Mr. Olson referred to as representing the large scale, largely export companies, but they have not consulted with us in any way. And their characterization of having consulted early on is strictly false. I have all the dates of when this information was released. March 3rd, the Pacific Prawn Fishermen's Association first notified us. March 12th, we initiated a petition. March 26th, we initiated a House of Commons petition. At that point, they still hadn't said that prawn tailing at sea would be legal this year. At that point, they were still saying it would be illegal this year and that they would take a stance of educate and inform and not enforce or something to that effect.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Olson, would you suggest, what's your response to what did the department fairly and accurately reflect the nature of the conversations and relationship and what's actually happening on the water?
No, I think in experience in the discussion that they had. They did not. They talked about their interaction with industry, and like I mentioned earlier, industry that they're referring to as a large association that generally is controlled by processors that send fish overseas, and not the commercial fishermen.
Mr. Asgard. You're on mute, sir. Mr. Asgard, sir, your microphone is muted.
No, I don't agree that I don't believe that DFO's characterizations of the consultation process were accurate. My understanding is that the consultations were industry driven. We asked to meet with them several times, and at first the answer from DFO was that there was no need to meet. And finally, they did accede to meet with the PPFA, their chosen representative group that they. Yeah, there was much that I didn't agree with that DFO said. I'm sure will come out as we go forward here.
Okay, my next question for you then, and I think you brought this up, I think it was you, Mr. Olson, that brought this up, but specifically, I want you to basically tell me if you agree with the following statement or not, that the use of size limits is ineffective in ensuring conservation of spot prawns. Would you agree or disagree with that sentence?
I agree.
Ms. Strobel?
Yes, absolutely. I agree.
Mr. Asgard?
I agree.
Would you say that the minimum size limit for prawns has been put in place over the years actually more as an economic driver or for economic reasons than for conservation and ensuring the survival and integrity of the population of spot prawns? Would you agree or disagree with that statement? Strobel?
Yes, I agree. Mm-hmm.
Mr. Olson?
I agree.
Mr. Asgard?
Mostly for economic reasons, yes.
Okay, so does it make sense to any of you then that the Department of Fisheries and Oceans is changing its policies when it comes to enforcement with regards to the tubbing of spot prawns based on a need for conservation? Does that argument from the department hold water?
Absolutely not.
Mr. Olson?
No.
Mr. Asgard?
Seems like a argument that they brought up after the fact when they had to try to explain their actions.
The department has basically said that it was through consultations with the industry, and it was, I believe, Mr. Davis that said that it was during a conversation that they had with industry representatives, which I'm assuming isn't you, where the industry indicated that they were going to increase the amount of tubbing that they were going to do as a rationale. So the interpretation was, and my interpretation of this was, when the industry is honest with its intentions with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans then turns that into an opportunity to change its regulatory approach to make life more difficult for fishermen. Would you agree with my assessment?
I would agree with that. And I have heard many fishermen say, ask me, why would I stick my neck out and do things like write a petition and go to the House of Commons and witness? Why would I do that? Because you're only going to get a smackdown from the DFO. It's only going to come back around and hurt us if you do that.
Do you have any indications, Ms. Strobel? I mean, that is a powerful statement. Do you, that might be a sentiment that's felt. Is there anybody that you can point to that would be interested in saying that they feel that they've been blacklisted by the Department of Fisheries and Oceans?
I will ask.
You have about 10 seconds there. Yeah.
I'll ask anyone if they would be willing to stick their neck out, as it were.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Calkins. And then we'll go to Mr. Hardy for 6 minutes or less.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And let's continue on. Does anybody want to answer Ms. Strobel's question? Do you feel that you would be blacklisted by coming forward as you have?
There's always potential for that, especially in the Pacific region. That's one of the concerns I think that that I think is important to bring out here, is that the Pacific region seems to operate on its own in absentia of this national mandate to support fishermen and to support individual harvesters, and they've taken a step into this path of we need to support the commercial fish processing companies, and many of those are, as you know, owned by foreign companies that are shareholders, and they do not have any interest in driving money into the Canadian economy or the fishermen's pockets. Their interest is driving money
if
somewhere
I can,
else.
somebody said that somebody who's fishing for a processor is getting $3 a pound. What are you getting when you sell direct?
Fishermen selling their live prawns directly to the retail customers are selling anywhere between $10 and $25 a pound.
Okay, so allow me to just then put, sorry if you hear barking in the background, I have dogs, that's what they do. The inference that we have, in fact, it's more than an inference, is that in fact, the processors don't like the idea of fishers selling direct to the public, because that takes away some of the product that they would otherwise be able to buy cheap and sell at a dear price. Now, you're nodding. Okay, everybody can nod. That's good. We'll just note for the record that if this is audio only, people are nodding. Are there fishers who are, if you like, in indentured service to the processors and they cannot sell directly to the public?
Absolutely. That's one of the problems with some of the leasing structures and issues with the licenses in the Pacific region, and that fishers are essentially employees of the fish company that gives them the money to go fishing, and then they're beholden, and they have to sell the fish to them for whatever price they are willing to pay. They have no recourse, and they don't get paid in many instances until months down the line, right?
Is it fair to say, yes, go ahead.
Well, another aspect is that many of the licenses are held by fishing companies, and so that gives them a very strong position to wield influence and also set the price that those fishermen will take. Often, the business model is the fisherman owns the boat, and the processor owns the license. And I just wanted to come back to a question you had I didn't get a chance to respond to, where you said you wondered whether a fisherman could actually receive a retribution from DFO in the case that they raise their head, a serious accusation. Well, I can tell you personally that one of the leaders of fisheries organizations has been boarded recently in a way that was very aggressive, not in a way that he'd ever been boarded in 40 years, where they jumped aboard his boat without asking. They went down into his hold to see whether he had any prawn tails there, and it wasn't very friendly at all. So that type of thing can occur on the grounds. Thank you for listening to me there.
How much time do I have, Mr. Chair?
You have about 2 minutes and 10 seconds.
Oh, lovely. Okay. So in past studies, we've looked at the owner-operator, the tie between the owner-operator of a boat and the ownership of a license. Mr. Asgard, you seem to be in a privileged position of having the license and the boat. So you're kind of the model as it would appear on the East Coast. On the West Coast, looking to Ms. Strobel and Mr. Olson, do you think it's the absence of owner-operator provisions that have allowed the current situation to develop the way it has?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, I think that plays a significant part in the challenges, because fishing companies are the ones calling people to lease licenses, not fishermen often, right? Mm-hmm. So their goal is to control as much access to product as possible. Their interest is not in supporting fishermen.
Mm-hmm. And to answer that, at Skipper Otto, we're often looking for more fishermen as we're growing, and they're often very cautious to talk with us or work with us because if they are perceived to be selling some of their catch to us, we don't own the license. It's a very, very tough situation. They may not get ice from one of the ice processing plants, will refuse to ice their boat if they find out that they are trying to sell independently.
We've heard that the processors, when they ship product, some of it is in tubs. Is that true? Frozen.
Yes.
And
Yes.
is there any inspection of those tubs by DFO that you're aware of?
No, because they become CFIA problem after that.
Well, we'll have to check with the CFIA to see what kind of inspections they do. Now, okay, let's say that the tubs as they're currently constituted, and Ms. Strobel, I appreciate you holding that up because it seemed to be fairly thick. There could be a couple of layers of prawns in there that might make it difficult to see very clearly what size they were. You know, I can see that bottom layer, but the top one is obscured by the label. Is it possible that you can redesign the tubs in such a way so that just by picking it up, they can see exactly what's in there, and that blows this whole readily acceptable argument out of the water, so to speak?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. And look, just a real quick 5-second answer there.
Yes, this
Ms.
is a
Strobel.
1 pound tub. There are also half-pound smaller tubs that are thinner. You can see almost every prawn in there, and it does take about 2 minutes to thaw one of these.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. And thank you, Mr. Hardy. We'll now move to Madam Gill for 6 minutes or less.
Yes. Thank you very much, Chair. I'd like to thank our witnesses, Mr. Asgard, Madame Strobel, and also Mr. Olson. We are very concerned with respect to what was said earlier. You heard the witnesses of the department, and I summarized that it was at the request of the fishers and not at the request of the industry. I will check, but they did say that I believe that it was at the request of the fishers and not at the request of the industry, and that's very different. They said there was no change, but the study that we are doing therefore would be useless because nothing has happened. Well, I want to hear, I certainly salute the courage of Ms. Strobel, but if we as elected members can't get precise information from the department, I know how you feel, how you must feel. I feel very much shoulder to shoulder with you. And in the I'm going to speak to you about Quebec, but it's the same thing for Canada because the territories are all made of rock, land, and trees, but the sea is there as well. You have brought up many things that speak very directly to my life experience. I have many questions, but I believe that the time that has been given to this study should be longer, and it should be a much longer study. Mr. Olson has talked about the words that can be a cause for fear, corruption and collusion, this loss of the industry that you spoke to, and also the vertical integration of the fisheries, because that is what I also have been hearing here in my area. I just want you to, I know I've spoken a lot in my time already, but I'd just like you to say what is on your mind. Ms. Strobel has given us 2 recommendations with respect to the legality. I would like to know if you have any other recommendations or if you have anything at all to say, because you are there to represent citizens and certainly not the industry.
I really appreciate the opportunity to be heard here, and I have told many of our members that I have renewed faith in the democratic process of our country because of what's been going on here in this committee. So I want to thank you all for listening. I think it's the first time that I have felt so heard in my life and in our work here. You know, I do think that it's important that we are talking about the ownership of licenses and quotas on this coast, and that this is very different from what happens on the East Coast. And because of this structure of ownership, we see the dismantling of our coastal communities. We see the wealth being siphoned away from coastal communities, from harvesters and from adjacent shoreside businesses. And I think this spot prawn issue has brought that to attention. And I agree that this committee, I would appreciate further looking into that issue. I think with regard to Canada's blue economy strategy, we have to think very carefully about who benefits from our blue economy, and is it in line with our values as Canadians about who we wish to support with those dollars.
Yeah, I think I would echo Sonia's words. I think, giving fishers an opportunity to have a fair playing field, that they have an opportunity to fish and make a living so that they're supported and that they feel like they are supported the same way that industry, in air quotes, I'll say industry being the large fish processing companies that have been making the lion's share of the profits off the seafood. It would be nice to be able to know that fishermen are going to get that same support through these types of processes. And I think that I feel the same way as Sonia, that having participated in DFO processes for 10 years, this feels like it's something that hopefully we can start to make some change that will be positive for fishers and for the communities that we work with and represent.
I'd like to address that question too. When I started fishing, it was all owner operators, and we saw the changes in the management as the quotas were instituted in the fisheries, and it's really created a lot of problems with license leasing and distortions, and now we can't eat of the market. I'm 65 and I have a fishing license, and it's time for me to turn it over to a young person, but it's too valuable for that person to afford it because it can be leased out. I just would like to say that yes, this is an issue that I'd like to see your committee pursue. It's a very important one.
Thank you, Madam Gill. There's about 20 seconds, or are you good?
I'd like to ask a question. Is it easy for Mr. Algard with respect to the licensees? Is it easy for other people to obtain permits and to be supported by the fishing industry?
No, it's almost impossible for a young person.
Par l'entremise d'un pêcheur.
Through a fisher.
For a fisherman, they're leasing licenses. They're in one case, I know a guy owns 8 boats, and he leases.
Oh, yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah. You go ahead. Finish. Take 5 seconds and finish up there, Mr. Escard. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So there's some guys that own at least one guy that owns 8 boats, and he gets a number of licenses that he leases from First Nations individuals, and then he puts those licenses on a number of boats, and then he gets other people to fish them. So this one fellow has 8 licenses that he doesn't own any of them. They were bought for First Nations by the federal government, and then he wields that in that way. He also owns a part of a processing company. So there's some real distortions in the way fisheries used to operate and probably would operate better.
Thank you, Mr. Escard, and thank you, Madam Gill. Appreciate that. And now to Mr. Johns, and just a note here, what I'm going to try and do, if time will allow, is in the next round allow like the 1-minute question for each party represented here to get one more question in for everyone before we wrap up. But Mr. Johns, you have 6 minutes or less. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the witnesses, and I feel terrible for the injustice that you're enduring right now and the impact it's having on your families. Ms. Strobel, you talked about the fact that there's not one plausible reason for the government to do what they're doing to DFO to be taking this action. We heard at the previous part of this committee earlier from DFO that they had no science that could back up any conservation concerns. They didn't even have data on how many tubs. They cited an increase of potentially 10 to 20% increase of tubbing. And their backup was that they had 2 violations a year on average for the whole coast. Can you kind of put that in perspective, maybe, Ms. Strobel, of the scale of how many prawns, how many day trips that would be per vessel out there? Just a glimpse of how this 2 violations is on the sector and the impact it's having on conservation.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Johns. I think, we're talking about thousands of trips We're talking about thousands and thousands of trips in the course of the season, and so 2 violations. It's so infinitesimally small that it's not even statistically really relevant, I think, compared to, Mr. Morrissey used the phrase, the proverbial sledgehammer to kill a fly. It makes no sense at all, especially compared to all of the actual conservation issues that are out there. And that there are species that we need to be protecting when we're talking about Fraser River, sockeye salmon, and things like that. Why on earth would we put this much attention and energy of all the things that we'd like to be spending our time doing? It's talking about 2 violations for undersized prawns, which already have been illustrated not to be a conservation issue. It makes no sense at all.
The government citing that they've worked with industry, that they've come up with this interim solution that 3 tubs can be thawed. That's my understanding. And if there's an undersized prawn, that they can go further into the vessel and start inspecting. My understanding is this proposal was brought to government by industry in February, and it's flatly rejected. Correct. Can you maybe share a bit of insight on how that consultation process is going?
Yeah, that's correct. The consultation process, again, was with the Pacific Prawn Fishermen's Association, who only brought the issue to the attention of the rest of us in the industry on March 3rd, when they realized it wasn't going to go away. And in February, when we asked them why we didn't know about this sooner, they said in February, when it first came up, they thought it was so ludicrous that it couldn't possibly actually materialize, and that it was based on nothing. And so it just didn't make any sense. And so they had obtained a legal opinion to say, this doesn't make any sense. So they truly thought it would disappear. At that time, the DFO, in all of their responses to PPFA, because they wouldn't speak to any of the rest of us, but they only spoke with PPFA, and their responses to them were to say, we are standing by our assertion that tubbing prawns and freezing them at sea is illegal as effective immediately. And they stood by that until this most recent statement by the minister that only conceded that they would put into place some measures to allow it to happen this year, with no commitment for future years. And of course, this is cold comfort for fishing families who have, as you know, leased their boat licenses for so much money that it's not possible to build a business around 1 year's confidence. So there was really no consultation, certainly with those of us on the ground.
Now, the issue, the interim measures for this year, let's call it, if that was in place for the future, everybody would be fine, is my understanding.
That would be fine. And what I don't understand is why measuring the 3 tubs is okay for 1 year, but why that's not okay.
Totally. Now, the PPFA, you talked about the legal brief that said it wasn't an issue. If the PPFA, the union, the Prawn Industry Caucus, and all the prawn tubbers didn't raise it, who did it? Who did raise it? If they said industry raised it, which is it, the exporters or?
I find that very strange when I heard the witness say that this was at the request of fishermen or the industry. I've seen absolutely no evidence to that. In fact, all we've been told was that it was actually CNP officers who brought it up around questions around how they would be in a conversation around traceability and labels on prawn tubs. It was not brought up by industry or fishermen.
Mr. Asgard, you talked about the DFO onboarding a 40-year fisher. Can you talk about the government saying that their efforts to inform and educate, how that's going? And we hear about people being blacklisted and targeted. Do you think the fishers in the prawn sector are feeling that right now? Can't hear anybody here for Mr. Asgard.
You're mute, Mr. Asgard. Yeah, your mute button. There you go. You're on now.
I can't testify for most fishermen, but I mean, yeah, when you do raise your head, and like I am here now, there may be some repercussions. What was the other part of your question, Mr. Johnson?
I think that's it. I think we're all seeing this. I think my last question would be to Mr. Olson. First, I want to thank you for the work you've done with Sachot and New Chalmette people. I bought prawns last night from Sachot. But you talked about the industry and making sure there's adequate consultation. Now, the Prawn Advisory Board only has the PPFA, and it doesn't have the Prawn Industry Caucus, is my understanding. You talk about the impact that has not having Indigenous fishers and other fishers, on the advisory board, so we get a full consultation process in place.
a quick answer there. Time for just a quick answer, Mr. Olson.
Yeah, I think that, in this fishing specific species industry, it's about 50% control of the licenses is held by First Nations at this point. So they, while their licenses are used for votes on PPFA to become PPFA, they are not fully represented, and fishers are not represented fully by the PPFA. It's more of an industry / processor based group, not a harvester based organization.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Thank you, Mr. Olson. And look, I know we're getting short on time, but everyone okay for a lightning round here for one quick question, final question from each party represented. So, if you can keep it to 45 seconds to a minute max, that would be helpful. So thank you, witnesses, for hanging in. We're going to do the lightning round here now. And I'll start with you, Mr. Mazur, for 1 minute, preferably less.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the witnesses today here. This has been great testimony, and it's nice to hear that you're feeling that you're being heard. And by all means, I'm still really taken aback by how you feel from repercussions of what you're doing and standing up for yourselves. So I can't get over that. But in Canada, of all places. So do you believe that DFO and the minister should completely reverse this regulatory reinterpretation and return to the interpretation that was used for the past 50 years? And that's for every one of you. So Mrs.
Yes,
Strobel,
absolutely. That seems to be the most logical solution.
Yes.
I still have time.
Thank you, Mr. Mazur. Good job. Appreciate that. Thank you. And off to Mr. Hardy for one lightning round question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Per Mr. John's comments, this wasn't the government that did this. This was the DFO. I think you can sense by the government representatives here that we're just as aghast and have been all along as everybody else. The rogues do this to us from time to time. Does anybody have any information about what the DFO actually would have you do next year when it's time for the prawn fishing season if you can't tub? Has there been any discussion, any way forward laid out by them so far?
No, nothing whatsoever.
No.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. That was very good. Everyone's doing well here. Okay, now Madam Gill for the one more lightning round question here.
Merci. Thank you very much, Chair. In the last witnesses from the DFO told us that if there was no change, it would be because of the legality of the fishery. Can you just tell me what you thought about it, Mr. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was as surprised as you were, Madame Gill, with this comment about no change. There is clearly change. If there was no change, we wouldn't be here having this conversation.
Yeah, I agree. I think that if there was no change, then the fishers, everything would have been fine. The fishing would have proceeded as usual, and more people would probably have an opportunity to get prawns in Canada rather than having them sent somewhere else.
This was a big change and big news amongst the industry and caused a lot of concern. We were caught flat-footed and shocked by this change in interpretation of the existing regulation.
Thank you, Mr. Asgard. Thank you, Madam Gill. And finally, for our last lightning round question, Mr. Johns.
Yeah, a question for all of you. I mean, this is deeply disturbing, what we've heard in the last 2 hours, the lack of information from the department. And now, no disrespect, Mr. Hardy, because I have huge respect for you. But I guess my question is to the witnesses. Do you believe the minister should get a free pass? Given the testimony we just heard, by not intervening immediately and backtracking tomorrow so that you can count on the future of this government and all governments having your back, and call off her officials. And basically, I guess the question is, what exactly needs to happen outside of thawing the tubs? If they need to inspect.
Yeah,
I think.
Go ahead, Mr.
I think that has to happen. I think that fishers to understand that they are supported and that the industry of processing companies and shareholding foreign-owned corporations that hold licenses and control the industry make the lion's share. We can't have this continue the way that it is. It has to change. And fishers, unless we can start seeing something happen, fishers are exhausted.
Yes, and I think unless fishers see the backing from the minister, unfortunately, a lot of fishers lump it all together. DFO to them is government, is the whole thing. And I think that it's really important a distinction is made here that there is power for the minister to rein in these actions of the DFO. That's actually where the power lies. And so we do need to see that action taken to have confidence.
And Pacific region.
Yes.
We need certainty. You know, we own packaging supplies. We have markets. We need certainty from fisheries as soon as possible.
Thank you. Thank you to each of the witnesses. Thank you for your valuable testimony. Thank you to each of the committee members for working with this rookie chair here this evening. Everyone's been so helpful, and I appreciate that. We do have one housekeeping matter here shortly. And I just want to thank the witnesses for being a part and being here this evening so much. We just have a couple housekeeping matters to take care of. So the witnesses are free to leave and be on about their afternoon or evening. And we again thank you for being a part of the Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans. So we appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Well, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So to the rest of the committee here, just a quick housekeeping matter. The chair's asked that we make sure we take care of this. This is in regards to, we have a study budget that was sent around to everybody yesterday, and we need approval on that budget. I believe it's right around $1,250. It covers the costs associated to the current study.
I move that we accept the budget as presented, Mr. Chair.
Okay. All in favor of that? Any nays? Well, I think we got unanimous approval, so that's great. And I see Mr. Arnold has his hand up. So, Mr. Arnold.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was able to log back on here. Prior to the completion of the salmon study and prior to the constituency break, we discussed having the minister appear.
Monsieur le Président.
Yep.
Mr. Chair.
Second, Mel. Mr. Arnold, I should say. Just make sure the boon's close. I know it's a lot of background noise. I think it's hard for our interpreters here. So, yeah, try again.
Okay, and I will speak slower. I had to log on here in the lobby. No?
It's hard for people to hear. Yeah, for sure.
So maybe then, Mr. Chair, I think I know where Mr. Arnold's going to go with this, if I can. Okay, he's fine.
I'm in a quieter area now. If this is better.
Yeah,
Mr.
we
Chair?
can hear you okay, I believe. I'll check with interpretation. I think everything's okay.
No, Monsieur le Vice-Président.
No, the interpreter says that this is not adequate sound for interpretation.
Okay.
I don't think Mel has the actual microphone selected on his computer from his headset. He's probably got the laptop.
You want to check
computer.
your setting there. You may have just a different setting. Mr. Arnold, if you're okay, I could go to Mr. Calkins if you like.
Try this now. Is that better? Is that
That's
better
good.
now? Yes, I'm seeing a nodding head, so my apologies.
Okay.
Yes, when we were getting near the end of the Pacific Salmon study and prior to the constituency week, I believe we discussed having the minister appear. And it was agreed by the committee that it wasn't possible to have her appear before the constituency week and still be able to get a draft out and complete the study before the end of the session. So we delayed having the minister appear, and I believe we all agreed that we would have the minister appear after the constituency week. I don't see that in the calendar that has been circulated. Can the clerk clarify when the minister has, that the minister has been invited and when she would be appearing?
I see Mr. Beach has his hand up, but I guess the clerk can clarify. Is that correct, Mr. Beach, or do you want to add comment here? Yeah.
My understanding is that the minister is booked for Wednesday, June 2nd, but maybe the clerk can confirm.
Okay, I'm getting a thumbs up, so we have confirmation for Wednesday, June 2nd. Thank you, Mr. Arnold, for the question. Thank you, Mr. Beach, for the clarification.
So just a point of order too, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I know that, it's not my job to tell people who they are or what they can do, but Mr. Hardy indicated that there was government MPs or government members before the committee here today when he was laying the blame squarely at the feet of DFO. And I just want to remind colleagues that there is actually no government. There's nobody here from the executive branch at all appearing before the committee, not even the parliamentary secretary as a member of the executive. Well, you might want to, as a, and I know what it's like to be a government caucus MP, but I think we should be careful. It's just my feelings and sentiments. I didn't want to reprimand Mr. Hardy in front of witnesses, but I think we just need to be careful about who we are and how we identify ourselves and be accurate in how we portray ourselves in front of witnesses. And we are simply members of parliament, whether we're a member of the government caucus or not a member of the government caucus, and we shouldn't be portraying ourselves as executive members or members of government. And I think Mr. Johns was completely bang on when he said that the minister and somebody who could make the executive decision would be more than appropriate to take action. But I wish we had the executive powers of government sometimes as a committee, and we would get some of these things done. And if somebody on the government side of the table were prepared to move the appropriate motion, you would have my full support.
Thank you, Mr. Calkins, and I see no further hands raised. I want to thank everyone for being a part of tonight's meeting, and thank you for your patience with the rookie chair here. Appreciate all of your kindness throughout this. Have a wonderful evening and afternoon, and we'll see you at the next call. Bye for now.
Great job.